guys, welcome back to Home Theater Gurus. This is episode 6. So in the last episode, episode 5, we went over the Volt 10 and kind of hit on the Volt 8 and the Volt series, in general. Because that's the speakers I have in my room, and so I wanted to hit on those before we actually started taking some measurements in the room. And, this of course is going to be discussing using down-firing speakers for Atmos. Now, it doesn't just work with Volt 8s, or Volt 10s. It's going to be with any down-firing speaker because we've looked at the off-axis responses, so you should by now have an understanding of what happens when you move off-axis of even a very well-designed speaker. So not just a speaker like the Volt 10 that is, questionable, it's not questionable, it doesn't have very good on and off-axis. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started with the down-firing speaker discussion. So here I have a room set up to the width of my room. Before we were using a 14-foot wide room for our examples. Now we have 16 feet. Now I do have another row right here. My room is deeper than this, but it's going to work because the width is exactly the same. So I've already laid out where the tops are going to be located at. Remember, they're 45 degrees forward. Now, if you don't remember that, if you haven't seen that video, that's going to be episode 3 to explain how to lay out your Atmos. But these are 45 degrees off axis. This line right here. So this seat right here, and these seats are to scale. Everything is measured out where the heads would be in my room. So that's 45 degrees. But this right here is the main listening position, or the center of the listening position. So when I do my distance, measurements in my receiver or whatever, and adjust all the speakers, their output, I'm doing it all from this point here. So from here, we're actually 54 degrees to this speaker. All right, and then we've got, this would be my wife's seat right here. That's 57 degrees, okay? And then this guy way over here, that seat is 61 degrees. So as you see, we're way off axis of these down firing speakers. And if you remember off axis, what those responses look like when you get off axis, you're losing a ton of output. Okay, so a speaker like the HTM, or actually any speaker, if it's rated, say, at 95 dB, which is what the Volt 10s are rated at, that's one of their selling features, just high output. If you're aiming those speakers straight down, you're so far off axis, you've lost that sensitivity, that they're no longer sensitive speakers, because all the sensitivity and the good sound, it's getting shot into the floor. So we'll just draw it right here. Here's a little guy sitting in his chair. All that good sound is here. That's down there where the dog is. He's getting the good sound. You're getting the off-axis sound and losing a ton of output and having to jack up the trim in your AVR. So it's no longer what you would consider a sensitive speaker, and it's taking a lot more power to drive it because you're going to have to adjust it, adjust the trim up so it can be sound, level match with the rest of the speakers in the room. Alright, so let's go ahead and do a little test in my theater room here. Kind of listen to some pink noise. Now, if you don't know what pink noise is basically, they take all the different frequencies in the room from 20 hertz to 20K, and they kind of average it out, and it's just going to be, it's that sound you hear when you're leveling out your system. That's pink noise. So we're going to listen to how it changes tonally, because if you remember, on axis, ideally you want a speaker that's flat across, or accurate. Now the Volt 10, I do understand it's not a flat speaker even on axis, but if you look at off axis, we're losing a ton of output, and you're going to be able to hear it. It's going to go from a speaker that's generally flat to a speaker that you get more bass and less treble and starts doing like this. And so you can actually hear it. It's going to sound like the tweeter completely disappears as you get further and further off axis, because the highs are going to have so much less power than the lows, and the lows are just going to kind of drown it out. Anyway, so let's go ahead and do that now. Alright guys, so here we are in my home theater. As you see, we've got 7 seats, and the back 4 right here are the ones that we showed, or that were on the board. So this seat right here is the one that's going to be 45 degrees off axis, and my main listening position is basically, where this red pillow is. So what we're going to do is, we're going to get a measurement with my Radio Shack meter. It's old, but she still works. So we're going to play some pink noise. we're going to get a measurement on axis from that speaker. And we're going to make sure we're the same distance we would be if that speaker was aimed right at the main listening position. And then I'm going to come over here to the main listening position and get another reading. And that reading is going to tell us basically how much output or how much we're having to boost the trim to make up for the difference being off axis. Basically, how much output are we losing being off axis. Now, that's not really going to give you the whole story because, like I said, we're actually kind of shifting, you know, where we're getting more lows and less highs as we move off axis. But it's still going to work the receiver harder because we are going to have to boost for that output loss. Okay, so now we've got our pink noise going. I've got the seats reclined because I want to get a measurement right where the head would be so I can have the distance right. Go ahead and turn the Radio Shack meter on. Okay, on axis we have 65 dB. So that's what it would be if we were aimed at the main listening position over here. We have 61 dB, so we've lost 4 dB. So now, basically our speaker that has sensitivity of 95, so now it's like basically like a 91 with a really bad response, of course. It's not going to be a 90, it's mainly a lot more bass than highs and treble. Okay, so that was 4 dB. Now one thing to keep in mind, 10 dB is considered audibly, or to the human ear, it sounds audibly twice as loud. So that means for every 10 dB, you know, something sounds twice as loud to our ears. So that right there being 4 dB is basically, you can say 40%. So it sounds 40% louder here than it does over there. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to recline all of the seats back. And, you know, so we know how far we are off axis for all of these seats. So I'm actually going to take the mic out from under my shirt and I'm going to let you listen to it, and I'm going to pass it, or I'll start over here on axis so you can hear the highs that are in that pink noise. Now you may need headphones for this. It may not come through very well like on a cell phone, but it's going to be extremely audible. You know, when I put that mic right here, you're going to hear a lot of highs and a lot of life. As I move back, I mean, when I get right here just 20 degrees off axis, you're going to hear it drop. Just like it did on the responses. That off axis where you quickly lose those highs, you know, just as soon as you start getting off axis. It's not like it's 30 degrees before it happens. It happens pretty quick and it is audible. Now, as we move over here and get to that further seat over there, it's really going to take a dump. So let's go ahead and get that started. Alright guys, now we have our pink noise playing again, and I'm going to let you listen to it on and off axis. Now this is just going to be about, say, 30 degrees. So say you had some angled baffled in-ceiling speakers, you know, some like from Klipsch, or, you know, some of the ones that have like a slight angle, 15 or 20 degrees is about all you're going to get. So that would put your main listening position, you know, maybe 30 degrees off axis if you had a 20 degree angle baffle. So this is going to be about 30 degrees. Remember, this head over here is 45. So here we go, on axis. Sure, I look like I'm doing calisthenics there, but you should be able to hear that. Okay, now we're going to go from on axis and we're going to go over here to this far seat, and you're going to hear that compression driver, that tweeter, just sound like it's non-existent. You hear that? I mean, even right here at 45 degrees, it's extremely muffled, huge blanket effect, and it's getting much worse. I mean, honestly, right here, it sounds like there's not much of a, you know, compression driver or tweeter up there, and that will be seen on the off-axis, the chart. You know, you can see how much attenuation or output we've lost in the upper frequencies. And over here, I mean, I could have the tweeter disconnected, and I'm not even sure I would know it. There's so much more lows over here. You know, the lows are so much greater than the highs that it's just drowning out the high frequencies. There's not much here. There's not much energy at all in the high frequencies. But of course, this is the main listening position, so this is where it counts, and still, it's, you know, just nowhere near what it would sound like on axis. We're losing a ton of life from our sound. You know, all the good sound is being shot right down to that seat in front, which, you know, if I have one row, it would be down on the floor where no one's sitting. And that would not be, you know, we don't want that. We didn't spend our money to have something like that. And there we are again on axis. Okay, I'm going to go back and forth to 45 as fast as I can. I'm trying to keep it quick. It's easier to hear when I move fast from 45 to 0. Alright guys, that should pretty much explain it right there. You know, and that's not just with the Volt 10, which is not really designed very well on and off axis and wouldn't be a speaker we would choose, according to Dolby, where they want us to have a similar response to the bed layer channels. But I mean, that's going to be any speaker that's down firing. We want to sit on axis. We do not want to sit off axis. Speakers aren't designed off axis, or they're designed on axis. That's where the best sound is. They want to have a good off axis because those are where our good reflections come from, and that helps give you a better sound in the room. So there are options if you do have to go with an in-ceiling speaker. Like in my living room, I wouldn't put speakers on brackets. In here, if my house wasn't for sale right now, I would put something like the HTM 8s, all around for surrounds and put them on brackets in the ceiling. That would definitely be, a whole nother ball game. Would bring it up to a completely, another level of performance that's light years beyond what I'm getting right now. Not that this doesn't sound good. I mean, I'm still getting, Atmos effect. It's still getting pulled up. Still sounds good. But, I mean, I do understand what I'm missing out on. So, anyway, if I had to do some in-ceiling speakers, and if you had the money, something like Triad, they do make speakers with 45-degree baffles. So they do understand that a 20-degree baffle doesn't cut it, and they understand the importance of being on axis. I haven't been able to find anything with really enough, baffle angle to really justify saying you're not going to lose performance. But now if I was going to put some in-ceilings in my living room or something like that, where I didn't want something hanging down, I would probably get something like the RSL, I think it is. They make the 15-degree angle baffle, or Klipsch has some that have a 15 or 20-degree angle baffle, something like that. But if you remember from episode 3, you don't have to be 45 degrees forward. I would probably bring them into the minimum or the edge of that recommendation at 35 degrees for the fronts and back, for a top front and top rear. That would help get you a little more on axis. That combined with being the 15 or 20 degree angle baffle, you still wouldn't be on axis, but you would be closer. So closer is better than being, I'd rather be 20 degrees off axis, the main listening position, than be 55 degrees off axis, because I went with a 45-degree layout and didn't have any angle baffle at all. And as far as the speakers that have only angle tweeters, you got to remember, this one was covered, I think it was covered on episode 1, maybe episode 2, about the crossover frequency. Crossover frequencies really going to affect what handles most of the vocals. Most of your vocals, like the meat of the vocals, the average is around 1K. So a lot of these tweeters aren't even handling the vocals. If they're crossed at 1500, K or 2000 hertz, the vocals are being handled by that woofer. So even in Atmos, if you have an angled tweeter that can angle 15 or 20 degrees, which isn't going to put you on axis by any means, but that's not going to help you with vocals or any lows. It's just going to put some of the highs and the ambience a little more towards the main listening position. So there's no comparison. You're not going to compare, with an angled speaker that matches the surrounds, is towed in perfectly right at the main listening position. That's going to be optimal, unless you can do something like Triad or something like that, or, find some other way to get, your in-ceiling speakers aimed directly at the seats, because that's where the good sound is. Oh, and for you guys thinking that, you can use Odyssey to boost some of this stuff up, I mean, if you look at like a tone like at 3000 hertz, let's say we're down 8 dB or 10 dB, that's going to take 10 times the power that it would if it was on axis. So say there's something happens at 3000 hertz, and on axis it would have taken 50 watts, okay? Off axis, if you tried to EQ that up, which Odyssey and those programs are not going to EQ that much, but if they tried, you're talking about, instead of needing 50 watts, you need 500 watts of boosting just to try to get, reproduce that sound to the same pressure, the same level you would have if you were on axis. So you can't really EQ these speakers that are down firing and get that good sound back to the seats. You just can't do it. And you're also, you know, it's gonna be way too loud in the seats that are up front, or anyone walking by. It's gonna just be you know, it's gonna ear splitting. It's gonna be horrible. So that's not an option either. You cannot fix, you know, a poor speaker setup. You can't fix, you know, poor speaker placement, as we went over in episode 1 and 2. Speakers have to be properly placed. They've got to be properly aimed. You know, we can't fix these things electronically. All right, so the next episode, you know, we're going to start looking more towards subwoofers and things like that. So we're going to look at where to sit, you know, using room mode calculators. Some of the room modes we can fix with our multiple subs, some we can't. So we need to make sure we're not sitting in room modes that the subs are not going to fix because they're not in the sub region. So that's going to be on the next episode. And we're also probably going to throw in an episode on screen size, using viewing angles and how to determine how far you need to sit, and if you have a set distance, how big that screen needs to be. So look for those episodes coming up. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll be alerted when the next episode hits. All right, guys, thanks a lot, and you'll have a good weekend.